We'll now request for Dhamma talk. Brahma Jaloka Dipati Sahapati Patanjaliya Divaraya Jata Santi Dasata Parajaka Jatika Desitu Dhamma Anuga Vimapaja.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So greetings everyone. We just finished a week retreat with Yom Pung, so I think probably many of you I just saw 12 hours ago, right? So hello again. And anyone new on board, namaste. So I think in Singapore, Thailand, Malaysia, Western Australia, it would be the morning of the 24th. That's that correct? And it's the full moon of July. So it's the full moon of what we call Asalha. Asalha is the Pali equivalent of July. And Asalha Puja is the day that we remember and honor and celebrate the Buddhist first teaching, the Four Noble Truths. So in the West, we've dubbed it Dharma Day or Dhamma Day. And then, of course, full moon of May is Vesak, which we commemorate and remember the life of the Buddha. So that's Buddha Day. And then Magha Puja in February is Sangha Day. So we've kind of dubbed them like that. I don't think they do that in Thailand, but Buddha Day, Dhamma Day, Sangha Day. So Bita has set up a little program which will be in 12 hours time roughly, where we'll able to listen to a recitation of Dhammacakka Sutta from the Amaravati Sangha. It's very lovely, and I think Bita will have the text scrolled through. Yeah, so don't miss it. On this retreat that we just finished, I was talking a lot about trust and awareness, and what came to me afterwards was a saying that Venerable Piyadasi from the London Vihara, who I think has passed away, must be. He used to have a really pithy saying. He said, "Trust in Dhamma and leave the rest to Kamma." Kind of neat little saying that monks like. And you'll find a Persian equivalent: trust in God and tie your camel. And tie your camel. Or was it Wellington, the soldier? He had trust in God and keep your powder dry, right? Something like that. So one example of not tying your camel was when I was in New Zealand. We were taking our van across in North Island and going across it's called a desert road. It's not a really long desert, but there's only one gas station for quite a few miles. So you have to make sure you're filled up. And so Ajahn Kuslo asked the driver, the Anagarika, we got enough gas to get across? And, yeah, we got enough. He didn't tie his camel. So we got halfway across, we ran out of gas. So Ajahn Kuslo was great. He said, well, he got the gas can out. He said, here's the gas can, start hitching. And this guy was actually, the Anagarga was a very shy man. He said, "What, me?" He said, "Well, you didn't tie the camel." So off he went, hitchhiked. It was pretty easy because people are very compassionate and got back. So trust in Allah and tie your camel. Or now, so trust in Dhamma and leave the rest to Kamma. Well, if you use the word Kamma as fate, then it would sound like it's a kind of fatalism. But actually, the word Kamma means intention. And then we have another word, Vipaka Kamma, which is the resultant of intentions. So Vipaka Kamma can mean like the momentum of accumulated intentions which come forth constantly in the stream of consciousness. So rather than have to think about past lives in the way that we sometimes do in terms of what's my kamma to be myopic or something like that, because in the last lifetime I looked cross-eyed at an arahant or something like that. I don't know. That's the kind of simplistic, I think, rendering of it. But the sense of, you can see kind of more logically that whatever intentions I make, be they for skillful or unskillful, if I keep doing them, they're going to have a certain momentum, and then the stream of consciousness is going to experience life through those momentums. So if I was a very opinionated person, I was opinions about everything, and I was very judgmental, then my life would become very opinionated and judgmental, and maybe very unhappy. I might be right, but I wouldn't be very happy because my life was always divided by my strong opinions. You see that in monasteries, sometimes monks will come and they've read the suttas and they know everything, right? And this is what the Buddha really taught. And you can see actually they're pretty unhappy people because they're not coming from joy or liberation. They're coming from a kind of opinionatedness of life. And that momentum might have come from who knows where. It's where they get their courage. Maybe their ego is invested in it. It's how they establish their identity. Or another person who maybe is, has a more kind of, humble mind, has a different momentum going into experience. One person might be very, very artistic, and so their life is around seeing color and creating color, say. So they have a momentum of appreciation of color, and so on and so forth. And obviously, morally, if I've lived a life which is in some way corrupt and manipulative of other people, it's not going to be very, very comfortable life, because I'll think other people are manipulating me, or there'll be remorse or regret, or there'll just be some kind of narcissistic psychosis, which would probably incarcerate me eventually. Whereas that's someone who is truly generous and compassionate, those momentums would carry forth into certain states of mind, which would be very wholesome. And also the sense of alienation from others would be much, much, much less with those kinds of. So this is how you can look at the Vipaka Kamma, resultant Kamma. And then what comes before birth, I don't know, because I certainly often speculate, why did I become a monk? It's a weird thing to do for a Canadian from Eastern European refugee family. I mean, it's just so that no one did it in my family, and no one is doing it in my family. So what's that about? Well, I could speculate, but I don't know, and I don't need to know, really. I don't need to know. I know it's for me good kamma, good vipaka kamma, and I'm grateful for it. But so trust in Dhamma and leave the rest to kamma. If you look at kamma as intention, that is obviously very important. If you're not really aware of your intention, and you just kind of say things or do things without any real sense of where you're coming from, then the results, you still get the results, but you won't know why. So, someone who's very, very critical all the time and opinionated, they don't see that they're not coming from love. They're not coming from compassion. They're coming from ego. And they think there's a strength in that, but there's a joylessness in that. So being heedless of intention And intention isn't just about kind of what I do functionally, it's about where I come from. Where am I coming from? Am I coming from a space of consideration, compassion, sensitivity? We had an example of that in Auckland, where I've mentioned this example oftentimes, so it's just really, really good one. And I've only got so many examples. And so if you've heard it before, my apologies. So we were in Auckland, in New Zealand. I was there for 10 years, from 85 to 95. And we have a city vihara, and the city vihara was in a suburb of Auckland. And I would go on weekends there once a month and have a Saturday program, Sunday program. And I would arrive usually Sunday morning. And so on the Saturday, there was a gentleman next door from India, and lovely man, just like full of God, just filled with devotion to God, in a way which was doctrinally maybe different than the way we Buddhists speak. But emotionally, he was very religious and very spiritual. Lovely, lovely to see. He had a sense of bhakti that you have in India. And so I invited him next day to the open day. He said, "Oh, great, that'll be interesting, great." And he's felt very lonely because his family were working, and he's all alone in the house. So we had a lovely discussion, and so he came the next day, and then we were sitting there, just a few of us, and we started to talk about God. And I always just adjust my words to try to fit into the spirituality of the person in front of me. And I'm not a believer in sort of absolute language, so I always try to tune in. Okay, so what does that mean for you? So we have a nice dialogue, and this other person who was a card-carrying Buddhist, hardcore, said, "We don't believe in God, we believe in anatta." And that was the cruelest thing I've ever seen. It was just so unkind and so insensitive. And I don't know what I said to that person. It was probably not nice. But this poor man, right? He's just effusive with love. And this other person just comes at them with this viewpoint. I'm right, you are wrong. That's intention. That's intention. And even though the brain says, I'm right, you're wrong, what's the intention? The intention is a lack of love, cruelty, insensitivity, and so on. So you can imagine that person probably does that all the time, and lives in a world of their making in that way. And the sadness of it is they probably don't even know they're doing it all the time, and they live in this kind of strange world of conceptual conceits. So to know the intentions of the mind is obviously very, very important. And if your intentions are wholesome, and you are conversant with them in a more and more direct way as they're happening, then even if life goes afoul in some way, you can reflect on that. You can say to yourself, well, I believe that, but did the best I could. And that's true. You come from a certain place, you have a certain amount of information, you do the best you can. And then all the regret and remorse that might come from the ego, the verbiage of the ego that can go on and on and on, judging what I did, you can actually return to that, because both you're mindful, you're aware of where you're coming from, and you can say to yourself, no, I was coming from a good place. You might have, so if someone blames me, oh, you said the wrong thing, and say, well, wait. What was my intention? I could say, well, yeah, I'm sorry that maybe it went askew, but that wasn't my intention. It wasn't my intention to hurt you. So other people can't just dump on you and lay a trip on you. And then also, as you observe intentions, you can see how some intentions are coming from restlessness, and the results are never very good, or they're coming from fear, and the results aren't good. So you can see cause and effect. You can see vipaka kamma. Vipaka kamma, resultant kamma, not just in terms of accumulations from this or past lifetimes, but just little accumulations that happen from A to B, just little connections that when I say this, I get that result. Obviously, like right speech, we're always seeing that, aren't we? You say something a bit off, you think, ugh, you feel a bit off, and you have regret and remorse. And that's one thing the practices of mindfulness and wakefulness are so very important, that we awaken to this refinement of the flow of consciousness and where we're coming from. It's hard to do, but it's an interesting little hobby, huh? I mean, what other hobby would you want except understanding your mind and doing things better? So yes, you do your best. But then if you think about life, everyone suffers. Everyone goes through mistakes. The Buddha almost got bumped off by his cousin Devadatta. He tried to roll a rock on him. Right? I mean, I don't have a cousins, and I've never had anyone trying to roll a rock on me. So even the Buddha got, he got, like, not everyone in this world is entirely blamed or entirely praised. It's true, isn't it? You get some people who you think, how could anyone praise him? And the Dalai Lama. His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Is that a rough time? And yet, who could be more saintly? So this is samsara. Is that the things that are given us are challenges and ways of learning, and sometimes seemingly unfair. So the philosophical question people ask is, why do good things happen to bad people and bad things happen to good people? Well, there we usually talk about Kamma in terms of larger perspectives that we can't understand right now. But personally, I'm not interested in answering that philosophical question, because I don't think, I know it's not a perfect world, and I'm never going to find perfection in that which is imperfect. I can find good friendships, and I can try to find good environments, and I can put milk in my tea in the morning. I can do things like that. But I know that's not really a life of perfection. That's just a life of comfort and pleasantness, which is okay. It's all right. So that as I was saying on this retreat, just now, the 7 days, and in the last day, I was saying that we can look at peace in sort of three perspectives. Maybe I'll go over that again. Apologies for those who are on the retreat. You could look at peace as the kind of external aspect of our life, the social, the environmental, the political, the economic, all those factors. Peace is possible to some extent. For some people, it's like if you're in Tigray, or you're in a war zone, or you're in, I don't know, Afghanistan, peace is maybe not possible at that level. So as a community, and as people who have resources, we should always look to the well-being of our environments, of our political systems, our healthcare systems, our education systems, and that's all very necessary. But a fellow like me, I'm not so much engaged in that. I live in a subculture, a monastery, so I'm not engaged in political action or sharing of communal resources or whatever. But those are things that are very, very important, obviously, because if you don't have peace on the ground and economic stability and that, it's very hard to touch the more subtle parts of the spiritual life. So that's one kind of peace. And the other is, of course, emotional. That if my heart is imbued with loving kindness and peacefulness, and I train in that, and I remember that, and I reflect on that, then that is a level of peace which is also possible. Which means a lot of inner work, which means taking responsibility for my cynicism or my judgmental kind of habits or my fears or anxieties and all of that. And there's a lot of literature about that, isn't there? Kind of from the self-help books to the nivaranas and to books like Emotional Intelligence. There's a lot of very good literature now, a lot of very good ideas about developing human, like the literature around PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorders, a lot of good things in society. So that's very helpful. So the emotional world, but the Buddha's enlightenment wasn't just about those two. His enlightenment was the third aspect, which is the idea of transcendence, transcendent peace, which is impossible to describe, of course, because it's transcendent by its nature. And access to that possibility is when we start to consider the Buddha's enlightenment. What did he realize? What was his realization? And if you think about it clearly, it wasn't like he didn't teach it like a social philosophy, although there were aspects in his training of the monks and nuns which would create the foundation for a good social philosophy, but that wasn't his purpose. And also emotionally, he was a psychotherapist dealing with kind of the dysfunctions of the human mind, although he would have obviously faced it and helped people with that. But that wasn't his primary aim, because his primary aim was his own, to somehow convey his own enlightenment and show us the path to that. At least that's my perception of it. So the first two are necessary. Kind of emotional stability is very, very important. You don't have emotional stability and the mind is just all over the place. And I think a part of that the way I look at that emotional stability is through the Brahmaviharas. That if there isn't love in the heart, then I don't think the heart can be open. If Buddhism is just a kind of critique of life all the time, if the experiences of life is always just intellectual and conceptual and judging and analyzing, I think that would very much limit you to the territories of thought. And the Buddha's enlightenment wasn't a thought. It wasn't like a kind of E equals MC squared kind of thing. Some kind of conclusion, scientific, intellectual, philosophical. It was a realization which is what he found so, I think, ephemeral or difficult, not ephemeral, but so difficult to convey, that he pointed to what it was not. And what it was not was indicated by our own suffering. You know, when we didn't understand what he understood, and we misunderstood the human experience, then of course we participated in the human experience in a way which was what we call avijja, which was filled with avijja, ignorance, not understanding clearly. And then as long as my intentions are coming from avijja, misunderstanding, not understanding, how can the result be in line with Dharma, with wisdom? So trust in Dharma is, and trust in Dhamma and little less to Kamma. Trust in Dhamma, what would that be? Well, Dhamma means truth. So if truth was just a thought, I don't think that would take you very, very deeply. But if truth pointed to something, if thought pointed to something, pointed to truth, then that's different. And that's what the teaching to me is. It's a reflective teaching, not a teaching just to be believed. So my Indian friend in Auckland, then who got verbally abused by this card-carrying Buddhist, believed in Buddhism, but had no Brahmaviharas. Didn't see this is a human being. This human being's feelings are very, very important. They're not trivial. And so this person had the thinking postures of a Buddhist, but didn't have the heart of liberation. Wasn't coming from Brahmavihara. An exceptional person, troubled kind of person, but it was interesting. So trust in Dhamma would be trusting in what would that be? Well, on that social level, it would be trusting in sila, trusting in morality. So if I am tempted by some kind of corrupt opportunity in my office, and I can embezzle money or something, I wouldn't follow that. Trust in sila. Then in terms of social relationships, I would also kalyanamitta, trust in friends who reflect on Dhamma. In terms of the emotional life, I've found, I don't know about you, that any instance of love is not selfish. Romantic love, that can be selfish. But the Brahma Viharas, the instances of that, to me, are never selfish, because it's not about me. It's about more like connection. So whether it's loving kindness, metta, it's like when if I'm communicating with someone and there is loving kindness in my thought, it's not my opinions that are important. It's our connection that's important. And then there's true communication. And that to me is trustworthy. Attraction, physical attraction, sexual attraction, romantic, and all of that, that's very personal. It's not wrong, but it has a tremendous longing and need in it quite often. And that longing and need is not what Metta Bhavana is about. And if you think about karuna, that's very obvious, isn't it? You know, someone is suffering and you notice it, then your heart's open. That's not selfish. And then, of course, mudita, the joy of someone's well-being, the joy of someone's success, or to see a smile on a monk's face when he's had a good night's sleep and he hasn't been sleeping well, things like that. This is love too, isn't it? And it's not selfish. So I said you can trust that. It might not be permanent, but it's arising, seems to me, something that now, in terms of intention, in terms of kamma, leave the rest to kamma, I think that's the kamma I'd like to cultivate. Kamma of love, the kamma of kindness, and so on. That seems to me important. So that I can trust in, because I've seen it in the moment. So intentions based on that trust. And then the other intentions of conceits in various ways, I can notice them. And then what do I trust in? You know, when there are conceited attitudes or divisive attitudes or harsh judgments or whatever, what should I trust in there? They're still there. They're still part of the vipaka kamma. They're still part of the momentum of my life, the way I interpret life. So I have to be with them. There's no way out of that. I don't invite them. I don't say, yeah, I think I'll be arrogant all morning. Well, that'll be fun. Everybody really love me if I do that. Obviously not. That doesn't work that way. But they will come, you know, for the best. You know, I have the best intentions to be kind. I have the best intentions to be compassionate, the best intentions to be at peace. What comes maybe is jealousy, confusion, irritation, judgment. So that's a part of the whole package of vipaka kamma. And they are momentums, aren't they? When you look, how sometimes you can just kind of get really upset about something which doesn't seem so great, and it just kind of rifles through your mind in strong ways. So these are how do you make intentions around moods and minds which are coming through from past intentions but are unskillful or egotistical? Well, you have to notice them first. You have to notice them first. So a person who is very arrogant or very conceited about their views and opinions and they don't see it, well, then they're doomed. They're doomed to that kind of self-definition, which is very, very limiting. But if they see that kind of, well, that is a sense of self. That is a conceited sense of self. When they see that as an object, then they're starting to trust Dhamma, because that's what Dhamma is. Dhamma is the objective knowing of the way things are. Then you're starting to trust Dhamma. Because in that, and that's trusting awareness of the way things are. Now, awareness of the way things are is not a judgment. It's not like saying I shouldn't feel jealous or I shouldn't have these kind of arrogant tendencies or whatever, but they are not me. They're objects. And that's the basic definition, I think, of Dharma, is this flow of experience. Sankhara is dependently originated, it arises and ceases according to causes and conditions. And there's awareness, there's the knowing. And trusting in that allows you to feel both the beatific and the hellish. You can be both an angel and a devil, but you act on the angelic and don't hang out with the devil. But the devil comes every now and then. I had this very, very strange experience once at Amaravati. And there was a man who had a kind of really beautiful Christian sensitivity and really loving. And his language was very on Jesus and God. And I couldn't quite plug into it, but I could certainly plug into his loving kindness. It's just delightful. So we had a talk at tea time, and he said the devil came to see him at nights. I said, "Oh, that's interesting. That's different." Okay, and so how does that work? And so we talked about it. He says, "Well, he sees like two little red eyes in the dark." I said, "Oh, really?" And what happens? He said, "I'm petrified. I'm terrified of this." I said, "Oh, yeah, yeah." And what do you do? Well, I don't know what I do. I just get confused. And I said, well, have you ever thought of giving the devil a cup of tea? He said, "What?" You what? Yeah, just invite him in. Tea and scones or whatever you have. You know, peanut butter cookies here, scones in England. It was England, scones. So, yeah, he kind of, well, that's, maybe I'll try that. Okay. And he had a room in the Bodhi Vihara, and he told me that it was the night time, and sure enough, these two little red eyes come, and he says very, very timidly, "Would you like a cup of tea?" or something like that. And this devil sits down beside him, and all of a sudden they're both crying. They're both crying. He and the devil then went. He told me this. I don't know. I don't think he was on anything. And so he and this devil figure, they go to the shrine room into the big hall in Amaravati, and there's no one there. It's the middle of the night, and they're sitting in front of the Buddha, and the Buddha's crying too. All three of them are crying. So I don't know, the way his mind worked. My mind doesn't work. It sounds like Blake's mind, right? That kind of thing. But what the story indicates to me is that he had the compassion to welcome in all things. That he saw that compassion wasn't a dualistic thing, me and the devil, competition and threat and danger, but it was that which includes everything. It included from the devil to the angels and that kind of thing. And that's the sort of story that because we have devilish kinds of things come up into our minds. There was one, I'm doing a lot of stories, aren't I? Anyway, one more. There was one when we were in Hampstead in London. A woman phoned up and said, "Lompo, I have to see Lompo Sumedho. It's urgent. So we invited her over. She came, and I was sitting and listening to Lompo Sumedho interview her. And he said, "So what's the problem?" And she said that her daughter had given birth to a child, and she hadn't had a chance to see the grandchild. She went to go see the grandchild, and when she picked up the grandchild, she had this horrible feeling of wanting to poke the grandchild's eyes. And she was horrified. So she gave the baby back to the mom and ran away. Ran away. Said, "I'm a horrible person. I'm a horrible person." And she'd been living this for months and hadn't gone to see the baby, or the daughter couldn't figure out what's wrong with him. So then Ajahn Sumedho said to her, Did you do it?" She said, "Well, of course not. I'd never do it." So it's just some aberrant mindset came up. But the thing was, she didn't do it because she loved the child. She loved, there was no problem. But her sense of self-guilt that I am this person who was a baby eye poker outer kind of person is not nice. But it wasn't Rosemary's Baby, right? It was just some weird thing came up into her mind. And so the sense of trusting in Dhamma, to me, is trusting in awareness and seeing that awareness is bigger than any experience, and it includes all experience. And that to me would seem like it's Dhamma, and that begins to incline towards what we mean by the Amatta Dhamma, the deathless, the timeless, and that's where transcendent peace would lie. Because you could see that if your definition of the spiritual life was simply some kind of array of wholesome emotions that you could sustain and maintain, each time some configuration of negative emotion, like wanting to hurt someone, like being jealous, came up, and your perception of the holy life was only wholesome emotion, and this is unwholesome, and you have to get rid of it, you could never be free. You could never be free, because trying to get rid of something is already itself unwholesome, because it's dosa, and it's self-identity, and it's ego. So if you saw that what I act on, my intentions, is to not act on the harmful, to not act on the hurtful, to not act on the corrupt, but my trust in Dhamma would be that it all arises and ceases in awareness, then I begin to incline to all three kinds of peace, both social, structural, environmental peace, emotional peace, and then the larger, this sense of peaceful coexistence with everything, that which arises and ceases. It's very hard to do. That's what quite often when I answer a letter, I'll say, I hope you're abiding at peace with the way things are. Especially if someone writes to me who has like a very horrible illness or some real difficulty, and I say, well, may you be happy. Well, yeah, I hope you get through this, but may you also abide at ease or at peace with the way things are. And that is always, you could see that's a kind of transcendent statement in the sense it's like, yeah, it's a hard time, but can you find awareness and acceptance within this larger mindset rather than what you're going through. And the beauty of that, it does liberate the negative emotions. It leads to a liberation from greed, hatred, and delusion. And then, because the heart is fulfilled, it leads to less greed and less pollution in the atmosphere. Because when your heart's fulfilled, you don't need so much, do you? You have everything you need. You fulfilled here. And then that whole idea of the Bodhisattva project becomes even more profound, because all your energy now, you need so little kind of stuff for yourself that your energy is available for helping others, for serving others, for using your talents and skills for whatever issues you want to be involved in. And sometimes we kind of, if we don't remember this transcendent part, the Amatta Dhamma, the unconditioned, the peace which is not dependent on emotions, then we can leave Buddhism as a kind of psychological practice, or then we can maybe initiate wholesome political action or environmental action, which is good, but it won't necessarily answer the Buddhist question: is there a way out of this cycle of suffering and birth and death? And so the Four Noble Truths, which we'll consider in 12 hours time, and we're always considering, is really a way of inclining towards that by looking at our misunderstandings of life. Because when we misunderstand life, we suffer. Not misunderstandings in terms of like I didn't know to turn right or left, not those. The kind of existential wrong attitudes we have and expectations. And so the liberation of the heart is not really realized, because it's always just a kind of an emotional teaching, a psychological teaching, or a social teaching, a social action teaching. But that would not be that wouldn't be the Buddha's enlightenment, I'd say. Psychology is okay, it's good, it's great. Social action is good, it's great. I saw that like when I was in New Zealand again. I'm in New Zealand a lot these days, aren't I? I don't know if you remember, way back, the Greenpeace boat was blown up in Auckland Harbor, and I think a Frenchman was killed. I think the French were eventually convicted of that or something. But I met some Greenpeace people before. I think it was before that, and they were green, but they were not peaceful. They were like, I wouldn't mess with them kind of people, and so to be socially active, to be in family, but also to have the spiritual side and be curious about the spiritual side seems to me the full complement of our human endeavor. And there's a kind of wholeness in it, because if we ignore that, Fritjof Schoen, I think he said, not everyone has the vocation to be a monk or a nun, but everyone has a bit of the monk and nun in them. And everyone has this aspiration to the spiritual. I would say, I think it is. And I think that's why we're here. And what is the spiritual? It's not just a pleasant emotion, but it is based on the Brahma Viharas. It is based on the emotions of love and caring and forgiveness and generosity and contentment with a little. And that gives you a basis of, you say, like in Thailand, one of the major trainings I got as a monk was contentment with little. And that doesn't sound like much, but just not having the food that I was used to, or the comforts, or the language. There's a lot of discontent arose. But the reflection was, no, contentment with little. That's a reflection. That's what you reflect on, and you can watch discontent. So I'd watch the discontent, and slowly, because I didn't feed that with intention, but I nurtured contentment with little as an intention. Then over the years, contentment with little became more predominant than discontent, because I wasn't getting my flavor of yogurt or the type of mattress I wanted or whatever. So it's true, isn't it? So then I could see, oh yeah, intention does work. Now it's not automatic. It took a while, but I kept coming back to the same intention. So if you think of in terms of the momentums of flow of consciousness dependent on intention, by not intending towards the thoughts of discontent, they still arose. So how to notice them, witness them, and be patient, and then to take up the intentions to be grateful. Oh, people are feeding me. It's the best they have, whatever language I wanted to use. So the intentions, the limited intentions of discontent began to fade away. Not that I'm perfect. And then the stronger intentions in the momentum of consciousness were content with little. Now you can see that is the basis for the realization of Nibbana, because the realization of Nibbana is something that has to be realized here and now. Peace is here and now, not something you get later or whatever. And so that trust in Dhamma and leave the rest to Kamma is quite a nice little package to kind of reflect upon, and as we go into Asalha Puja. So I'll leave that for your reflection tonight.
Thank you so much, Luang Po.
Sure.
Tandamayam o vadagata sadhu karang kadama se sadhu